If you're ever online and clickbait your way through a list of the greatest punk and or post-punk albums of all time, and that list does not include 1979's Entertainment by the Gang of Four, then I assure you that whoever put this list together is a gutless poser who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. In fact, the list is probably some sort of filthy virus-churning spyware that'll melt your hard drive, steal your account numbers, and generally do you no good. I'll even take it one step further. The Gang of Four's first album isn't just one of the best records of whatever genre you want to label it as. It's one of the greatest albums ever made. And their follow-up in 1981, entitled Solid Gold, is an astounding record in its own right, too. And this is not just my opinion, it's the right opinion. It's also shared by a million other people. Gang of Four's original lineup included the late Andy Gill, John King, Dave Allen, and my guest today, drummer Hugo Burnham, who, as it turns out, lives in my home state of Massachusetts as a professor at Endicott College, about 100 miles away from my house. And yet, this is the first time we've ever hung out, even if it is on a Zoom call. The Gang of Four have just released a remarkable box set called 77 through 81. Includes fully remastered versions of their first two records, an additional collection of singles, and a 2-disc live set from the American Indian Center from 1980. And there's a lot more where that came from, all on Matador Records. And for any fan of their music, it's a remarkably well-compiled retrospective of their best work. So today, I am absolutely thrilled to talk to Gang of Four original drummer, Professor Hugo Burnham, on Baxi's Musical Podcast.
It's Baxi's Musical Podcast.
Set this up here so it's a better position.
That's perfect.
Bigger and thinner. Is all
Listen, I can't take my laptop further away from me to look thinner. I was listening to an interview that you did on another podcast. I think it was That Record Got Me High, and in that conversation, I find out you're in Massachusetts, about 100 miles away from me. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's a local call. I have to find a way to get a hold of Hugo Burnham.
save
And
money on the call. Yeah. Where are you?
I'm in the Springfield area.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so not too terribly far away, but to find out you were in Massachusetts, I'm going, how in God's name did this guy find himself in, of all places in the world, Massachusetts?
Okay. Well, fairly straightforward. In 1988, I moved to New York from London. At the time I was in management, I was looking after, among others, Shriekback and Julian Cope, who were both signed to Island Records. And I was just going back and forward across the Atlantic a lot. And I'd always promised myself I'd live in New York one day. So I thought, well, this is silly. I might as well go there. I was getting a bit bored with London. So sold my flat on the Old Kent Road and moved to New York and spent 2 months subletting from one of the artists signed to Island up on 48th Street, I think it was. And then I found and bought an apartment in Brooklyn, back when Brooklyn wasn't quite as hipster as it is now. This was, again, the late 88. And where I was right near the Brooklyn Museum, across the park from the park there. And I sort of 6 blocks that way, it was like yuppie heaven. And 6 blocks the other way, it was sort of like Beirut or something. But it was great. I loved it. And then within a couple of months, Island actually asked me to do A&R for them. So I was doing A&R for them. I was there for 2 years. I met and married my wife there. No longer my wife, my ex, who was an amazing music publicist who'd previously been a dancer. And we moved to Los Angeles at the end of 91 because I'd gone then to work for another label, a new label led by Terry Ellis, who was one of the founders of Chrysalis Records. Mm-hmm. Sent me out there to open up and run their West Coast office for the label that was based in New York. My wife at the time went to work for Scotty Brothers, working with James Brown and various other artists. And then she went on to work with Virgin and ran her own shop for a while, worked with Paisley Park. She was Prince's label VP of publicity. I then I left that label and went to work for Quincy Jones at Warner Brothers for 3 years, which was great. I mean, fantastic 3 years.
What was that like to work with a guy like Quincy Jones?
He was fantastic. I mean, when I had my sort of first meeting with him, it was a friend of mine had just become the president of Quest Records, his label over at Warner Brothers, who brought me in to meet Quincy. And he was charming and great. He said, "Yeah, I want to expand the label. Just Chris sold his and Jerry and Herb sold theirs. I want to build it up and sell it. And I need somebody to do all that noisy white shit I don't understand." I said, "I'm your man." So that was a good 3 years there, and then I went to work for EMI Publishing up in Hollywood there, and then we left LA the end of '98. We'd had a good 9 years, but there was something in the air. It was just change was coming, and we at first were going to move to Atlanta, both to work for Capricorn Records, where my wife had been VP of publicity, and that fell through.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd sold our house. It's like, oh, I guess we had better leave. So we drove back to Massachusetts, where her parents were living. She grew up in New York City, but they had a place in Gloucester, Mass. And we spent the winter there, waiting to see what to do next. And we sort of stayed. We were doing management. Then we had a baby, and then she went back to become a Pilates trainer instructor, and I fell into teaching at a college in Boston.
Most people don't fall in love with New England because of the winters. I mean,
God, I am not a fan of snow. I'd always said that once Tessie leaves high school, I'd get out of here, which I was planning to do, but then met my current wife, and I'm still stuck here.
Yeah, I know. I've gone from Massachusetts to I was in Milwaukee for about 11 years because there were no good colleges here in New England, and then
Right.
and then I came back to Massachusetts. I'm thinking, at some point in my life, it would be nice to not live in a northern city and know what heat in March feels like, or February. Someplace I can sweat in January.
Yeah, but at least it's not on fire here in the winter.
Good point. You're teaching and running the internship program at Endicott College.
Well, little less hyperbole, if that's the way I've said it before. I run the internship program for the Visual and Performing Arts School at Endicott College.
Gotcha.
Each school has its own coordinator for the internship program, and I work with all the arts kids, which is graphic design, photography, fine arts, art therapy, interior design and architecture, and performing arts. I'm with my people.
I talked to another guy not that long ago who used to belong to a band called the Adolescents, Alfie Agnew, who is a professor of math at Cal State. Followed him.
Right.
And I asked him, do your students or other faculty have any idea of your background, or are you just another face on campus?
When I started teaching in 2000, it was at the New England Institute of Art in Boston. And it was an applied art school. So all the majors were, but it was radio, it was graphic design, photography. The largest major when I went there was music, as in music technology, studio technology, that sort of thing. So a fair number of the kids were pretty clued in. I'd been brought into the school. Most of the faculty there were actually still working in the industries they were teaching them, which is what made it such a great little school before the for-profit venal monsters bought it out and took it over and destroyed it. But the head of the career services department, who had actually brought me in the first place, used to manage Squeeze and Robin Hitchcock. We'd known each other many years ago from drinking in the same pub down in Kent, South London. And so it was a fairly savvy bunch of people on that campus. But, I sort of hid my light under a bushel initially. The beginning of every semester or every year, I always dressed properly. I wore a suit. I always wore a jacket. So, so no ink showing or anything like that. I never wore sneakers, I never wore denims or just t-shirts. I was the adult in the room. But inevitably, kids, especially if they're in those industries, they want to be in those industries. They'll Google their teachers, and yeah, most of them knew or found out. And I was very lucky. I mean, I think that having a history in the industry that they all wanted to be a part of gave me and almost all the other faculty a step up, because we were credible, not just lifelong academics, when we were teaching them about how to operate and behave and be in those industries.
See, I would think that would make you maybe the coolest professor in the world to have been, a part. I mean, I went to a Jesuit college in the Midwest, and there was nothing cool about those guys. Yeah, and if you
No,
Googled any of them, you'd be afraid of what you'd find out.
yeah. I mean, I'm a cool professor just because I'm damn good at what I do.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, here, we're now talking 20 years later, so we're that further removed from the time when I was so not famous. But and when we did our first Gang of Four reunion of the original members in 2005, that college actually gave me a sabbatical to go on tour,
Really?
which is very great. Well, so it was a legitimate reason to take a sabbatical, because I'm doing professional development. So,
right. But but at the end of that tour, you went back, and was there any conversation about continuing with the band, moving forward, or
we lasted about 18 months as the original foursome. Without going into great detail, there was some pressure from management who were when we started the whole affair. It was just Andy's manager, and he was what's the professional expression? He was a nasty little shit. He worked hard to get me and Dave sort of sidelined again as soon as possible, which is ultimately what happened. And the first year, 18 months was fantastic. I mean, the business part was not very pleasant, but when we were on stage together, when we were playing together, it was glorious. It was strong. We worked very, very hard to do it well, not just toot around the country resting on our laurels.
Right.
I mean, it was hard work. It was physically for me. I mean, all of us, but particularly for me, trying to do at 50 what you used to do at 23 or 24 is not so easy.
Well, and it's not like you're playing, simple drum parts. I mean, you're playing some pretty athletic, very, definitive, drum lines, in these real angular songs. I mean, that does take a physical toll on you.
It does. I'm not just keeping time.
Right. And to your credit, you never just did that, which is actually, I think, between you and Dave, that rhythm section of that band, to me, was maybe the most crucial part of it. I mean, lyrics and guitar playing are one thing, but you guys were Gang of Four was a band that had such an amazing groove to it that it separated. I thought that separated you guys from nearly everybody else.
Well, thank you. But I think one of our strengths was how much we worked with and relied upon each other. There were no real leads. Just stylistically, it wasn't so much solos as anti-solos. We'd drop out. It was that whole dub style of leaving space and gaps. And we pushed each other a lot when we were creating and writing the songs. Reputation for arguing about everything, but it was because we were passionate about how the songs and the music and the playing and the performance would be. So we weren't easy on each other at all about that, but I think it worked very well. Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky working with Dave. I mean, a stunning individual bass player. I mean, just really good. And you talked about, they're not just keeping time, but what I also hated and wanted to avoid and couldn't do was be a terribly technical drummer. Vinny Colaitu, I was not. So that's important. I mean, when Dave first joined the band, he was the real musician. He'd been playing for years in jazz bands and cover bands, and so he could really play. And the first few months, it's like, play less, Dave, too many notes, which he embraced and made his own thing. So, and then I was very lucky after Dave left, I spent a month or a couple of weeks playing with Buster Cherry Jones from Talking Heads and Sharks and others. That was really exciting and fun. But then when we made our decision to replace Dave on a more permanent basis. Sarah Lee came in, who we knew from the Leeds music scene anyway, and she's fantastic. I mean, as proven by all her subsequent work with everyone from Annie DeFranco to B-52s, etc., etc. She's a terrific bass player, and she was really good to play with as well. But Dave and I clicked together very much in setting up that whole Gang of Four thing.
With the box set coming out, and reviewing the first two records, and having to have the first two CDs here, of course, and been listening to them a lot of the last couple of weeks, and I just the box set is very, very cool, and it's very clear how important these albums have become when you hear other bands trying to either emulate sounds or have drawn inspiration from these records. How did you decide to? I mean, you and John and Dave come together to say, let's review these things and repackage them in a box set, because it's a beautiful looking box set.
It is beautiful, and it's beautifully done, and it's beautifully compiled, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. Two main things came together to get us on this path. One was the 40th anniversary of the release of Entertainment. The other was having managed to get all our copyrights back from Warner Brothers in the US under the copyright law, which a lot of labels prefer not to have to deal with. But we asked, they had to accede and give us everything back, because the Warner Brothers we'd signed to in 1980 were a fantastic, unbelievable label, large, not just because of their catalog, because of the people there. And I think that's pretty much why we'd signed to EMI for the rest of the world in the first place, because of the people. And every label can do it. Every label can bugger it up. So at least work with people you have some affinity with and trust over what they say and do. So, but by the time 35 years plus, Warner Brothers was no longer really Warner Brothers. They were Warner Brothers in name. It had moved this way and that way, and just there was nobody there we knew anymore. And we said, well, we have a lovely history. If you want us to stay, make us a proper offer to keep us going, because otherwise we're going to go somewhere else. And the royalty rate we had was good in 1980 comparatively for an act that hadn't already sold millions of records. But by the 2000s, it was wrong. It was low, and lots of other little bits that had kicked in. We just weren't doing very well from that. I mean, we'd been in the black. We'd recouped decades ago. And they offered us, I said, well, we'll keep you on, forever. They offered us, who cares, $30,000 advance and an 18% royalty rate, or maybe up to 20. So we said, no, thank you. And we left and talked to a small number of labels who were very interested, and decided it was pretty clear to us that Matador was the place to go. Again, largely because of the people, but they also made us a very good and sensible offer of a significantly larger advance, which was very generous given it's just for cattle, and a significantly higher royalty rate, which I have to say the advance with the sales of the box set, which the initial vinyl run of 3,000 limited numbered sets sold out in a month. So that was very lucky. I wish we'd made 4,000.
I do too. I do too, because I went on Matador's website and it said the vinyl was sold out, but the more were on their way. I'm like, oh man, I just missed it.
The CD's coming. It should have been here months ago, but everyone's suffering from manufacturing problems because of the pandemic and everything. And it's sad, but yeah, it'll be there. And we renegotiated our situation with EMI for the rest of the world, and they're also putting out the box set, which is great. And then next year, of course, it's the 40th anniversary of the release of Songs of the Free, which was our third album with Sarah Lee. So we're preparing for that now, and we plan to go out on tour to, I won't promote it, but just to help celebrate that and the box set, even though that was last year. Well, this year finally, although it was supposed to be last year.
Who will be playing guitar on that one, on that tour?
A person with very big feet.
Yeah, well, they got big shoes to fill. Absolutely. Yes,
Yes.
caught that. Talk to me about Andy Gill. I mean, obviously, this has been a rough year for a lot of people, but Andy died last year, and the kind of guitar player he was. I mean, I think anyone who's listened to those records knows how brilliant he was and how important he was to the band. But as an individual, it's kind of an enigma for a lot of fans. They may not know the kind of person he was, and he had. I was reading up on him and his just some of the bands that he produced throughout his career. Pretty remarkable lineup of production credits for him. Tell me a little bit more about Andy.
Well, he was a brother. And I don't say that lightly because back in the day when we all started this and the sort of 6+ years I was in the band, I mean, we loved each other. We were really fond of each other. We fought like brothers, but I think that those four elements pushing and pulling against each other is what makes for great art. Like the Who or the Kinks, or I know people would disagree, but I think Oasis, they're really, really good at what their thing.
Right.
People who fight, and because making art possibly shouldn't be all lovey-dovey and easy. I mean, the Police weren't exactly in love with each other full time. And then we always stayed in touch over the years. Leading up to the reunion. I mean, there were times when people were in and out of each other. There was never really a period that I wasn't in touch. I mean, I think particularly in the last 10 years or so, when there had been a lot of discord, I was the only one who everyone spoke to because we had ongoing business all the time. Andrew was a very difficult man,
Hmm.
very talented, amazing guitar player, forceful personality, but very, very difficult. But we stayed in touch. We valued each other. I think sometimes in the later years, Andrew, in the media, perhaps valued his other three band members less than we all did, which caused further sort of fraction. But it was a miserable and sad time when he passed away.
Yeah.
He was not a very well person for very many years. I don't think that's a secret. He wasn't a healthy person, and it was very sad. Not 100% surprising that he became ill.
When you're working on this box set and you're working with John and you're working with Dave on this, obviously his absence must have been felt in this process, especially when you're combining not just the vinyl but also the book, reviewing a lot of these your memory. I don't know how nostalgic you get when it comes to that kind of thing, but I would think going back and looking at old photographs, old notes, maybe old
Well,
tapes.
okay, so yeah, I mean, John led this whole project. I was definitely his lieutenant, doing a lot of the work. Um, I'm a bit of an archivist. It's finally all those boxes I've been hauling around the world for the last 40 odd years. It's like, yes, now I can use them and do things with them because I always said, oh, my kids will love looking through this. And my daughter could give a flying fart, which is being a bit unkind, but it's old stuff. um, so a lot of that, reaching out to a lot of friends, musicians, crew, friends who all helped us with memories and photographs and ephemera. It was terrific. It went a lot faster. The fact that Andrew was not involved, because Andrew was not the most focused of people and a terrible procrastinator, which I think came from a desire to control everything. So again, although we missed him, and it was really important that the set honored him as much as anything else, which I think we did with vigor and meaning and honesty. It was a lot of work, and it would have taken a lot longer had everybody been
Right.
involved.
I can certainly understand that whole idea of maybe like too many chefs making the soup, and if
Yeah.
if you're not all 100% focused on getting it done, I mean it can cause a lot of headaches. Obviously, in this box set, I mean it's very clear that for the remainder of you and John and Dave as well, is that this is something that you are all still very passionate about. And when you consider, how, the reputation that entertainment has had over the years, and frankly, I think Solid Gold is an incredibly strong record also.
You and I both. I mean, in many ways, it's a record I favor a bit more. It was much more fun to make.
Mm.
Um, I enjoyed the process a lot more. It was less stressful. Um, the songs are great, and the fact that we did it, because for many people, a second album is hell because you have 2 or 3 years of gigging and writing to build yourself up to a first album, and then suddenly it's like, God, you've got to write another 12 songs. But I think it's an incredibly good record, a great record.
I think it's a great record, and I think it's also lyrically it's maybe underestimated. I remember hearing Paralyzed for the first time, and there aren't a lot of songs where I can hear the lyrics and say, "Oh shit." But Paralyzed is one of those things where you just go, "That is such a powerful song about."
That is absolutely one of Andrew's finest moments. That
With
was him.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's to me, it's different than Entertainment, but
Oh yeah.
it is just as entertaining as Entertainment,
Well,
without
thank you.
without question.
It was deliberately different. I mean, it would have been torture to have to, or feeling we would have to somehow recreate or do Entertainment Part Two. That would have been boring.
One of the things that Gang of Four did, though, after and maybe with the third album, this is true. It tended to sound like it was going down. I don't want to say a more commercial path, but maybe a more mainstream sounding path, especially
Songs of the
after you
Free.
left. Yeah, it
Oh well, no, okay. So Songs of the Free. I think we just wanted to be heavier and funkier in some ways. When after that, the last thing we did with Dave was the Another Day, Another Dollar EP, with To
mhm.
Hell with It, which to me is the best thing we did in the studio ever. It's the closest to the sort of sound and ferocity and power of the band live. That was great. The great producer, Nick Launay. God knows why we didn't stay with him for the third album. Um, but when we got to Songs of the Free, I think it was definitely part of some frustration at not selling any records, and I think there was definitely a feel of, okay, maybe we can do what we do and be difficult and interesting, but slightly towards more the center of the road. I won't use the word middle. um, but and I mean, I Love Man in Uniform was on the way to being rather successful as a single, but then of course the BBC, with both hands, pulled that opportunity away the moment that Margaret Thatcher decided that anything that sounded, any sort of art that was to do with military and all those sort of things, when she declared war on the with Argentina over the Malvinas or Falkland Islands, the BBC said, right, out, we can't have songs like this when we're going to be reporting body bags coming back. So, and once again, screwed.
One more thing that Margaret Thatcher did for the UK,
I am not a wealthy man because of Margaret Thatcher.
right? um, a while back, I also saw a video that you done. I assume it wasn't that long ago because the box set was in it. You did a video for Amoeba Records talking about some of the records
Oh yeah, yeah.
that were really influential for you, and I have seen this band come up time and time again, and it is one of those bands where in the U.S. they are virtually unknown, but they are maybe the most influential band in UK pop music, and that would be Dr. Feelgood, a band that most Americans have no clue about. And
No,
every time I hear Down by the Jetty, I think this is standard American blues type of music. It should be known here more in the
R&B.
States. Yeah.
It's classic R&B, done by angry English white boys. Extraordinary band. I mean, you just only have to go to YouTube and find things. I mean, I've been saying this for years to people, and you ask any English band of our generation, and they're, oh yeah, Dr. Feelgood. I mean, Jake Burns from Stiff Little Fingers, big fan. The guys in Killing Joke. I mean, just anybody of our generation, Dr. Feelgood were it.
It's like from band to band, they all cite Dr. Feelgood as an influence. I mean, I talked to Jake Burns, I talked to Andy Partridge from XTC. They all say Dr. Feelgood was not just important but crucial to their band and their sound and the way they played. And maybe that whole pub rock scene was kind of a precursor to a lot of stuff. but that's a
It
band that
was, precursor to punk in a way, because it started the movement away from the whole rock god thing of being so distant. The equipment, the playing, the chords, the this. I mean, look at the back of the Pink Floyd album, I'm a Gummer. The picture with the van and all the equipment laid out on the road. It's like you look at that when you're 14, and Christ, I'm never gonna be able to get to this. But then the whole pub rock thing, it's like, four guys in the band, maybe five guys in the band, one amp, this, that, and bang, three chords. Which punk then sort of distilled into three small chords. um, but it did think, okay, they can do this, I can do this, really. But there were lots of pub rock bands, but then it gets down to the X Factor and the magic and unbelievable performance. And I think we took a lot from them in that respect as well, just the way we were on stage. I do remember John, back in the early days when REM, this little band from Athens, Georgia, they used to open for us on American tours, as they were trundling around in their van, getting $50 a night, maybe 100 if they were lucky, sleeping on our hotel room floors because we could afford them, drinking our beer, smoking our dope. I remember John saying to Michael, you have to own the stage. This is your stage. Own it. And that, the whole punk rock thing, oh no, everyone's invited on stage. Fuck off. This is my stage. And that's very important to the dynamic of being there for an audience. We are performing, entertaining. However, whatever style you choose to do that in, this is my manner up here.
well, I mean, I think from a fan's perspective, if you pay $100 or more to see a concert, I mean, you expect to see a show, not just a bunch of musicians turning their back to the crowd or or not engaging. I
Right.
mean, at the price point that we're at now with concerts and have been for a
Even
while.
back in the day, when we first came to the States, the few people that did know about us, which were, a very aggressive few people, but enough in every city we played in the summer of 79, right, 79. I think a lot of people expect, because what they'd read, we were sort of serious, we were political, we had these songs, and they were expecting what became the expression, a bit of expecting sort of dour shoegazers, and which is not what they got.
There were some other bands I want to ask you about, and one of the things that I've done during the pandemic is try to kind of re-educate myself on bands that I've heard of but felt like I should know more about. And being home has given me a wonderful opportunity to waste a lot of time. And one of the bands that I got pretty into is a band that you guys were very, very much associated with, and that was the Mekons, a band that there are some of the best songs ever written by this band. That and even say
Insist-
even calling them a band, it's hard to really say, but
they are a social movement, and they are so important and so solid and so good. I mean, they are still making records. They are still out there. They still tour. They have what it's now a sort of more solid cast of fantastic people, including their drummer Steve Goulding, who was originally with the Rumor, who took over from me when I left Gang of Four. So that family thing is still there. I mean, we before we were bands, we were all friends. It was a group of essentially mostly fine art students with other people like me. I wasn't doing fine art, who socialized, who drank, who danced, who went out to late night illegal clubs, who went to the same pub all the time. So it was definitely, and a number of them all went to the same high school in the South, near where I went to school. So yeah, fantastic band, great records, great people. I travel across the US, okay, not all the time. I'm not that mad, but I go and see them in places because I love them dearly.
yeah,
Great songs, my God.
they're wonderful. Again, it's kind of like in the same way that Dr. Feelgood is somewhat unknown and underappreciated here in the States. The Mekons are kind of in that same blanket. I mean, a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of research, and you realize, my gosh, I've wasted my life missing these great songs.
Yeah, but Mekon's fans are religious.
Yep.
I mean, they are fierce and loyal, and they may not be great in numbers, but they are great.
Your career is kind of like you said, it's been broken up into parts, and I would imagine that the perspective you have of being an artist, but at the same time being involved in record companies and A&R kind of gives you a little bit of an insight as to what has happened to that business. It seems in some regards it seems to have evaporated in a lot of ways. I know it's still hanging on for dear life. What is the status of the music business right now? Or is that too broad of a question?
Well, it is a broad question, but it's not the. This is not your father's Cadillac anymore. It's not about people really at all anymore. And that's what's beginning to happen. Even back when I was still engaged in the industry, mavericks and crooks and clowns who were the backbone of it all and were brilliant, were being replaced by accountants and lawyers and people with MBAs. And it was like, really before the internet kicked in, it was people doing it by numbers and doing it in a less warm way about relationships. I lost my last job at EMI Publishing, where I was for 2 years. A new guy came in to run the place in LA, and when we had our first sit down, he said, "So Hugo, how many lawyers have you had lunch with this week?" And in 5 seconds, I thought to myself, okay, I'm out of here. Not by choice, but he wants me gone. And I could have said, oh, I could have lied or said, yeah, well, but I got 3 next week and all this thing, because so much deal making was about the relationship with lawyers who were representing acts, and rather than a more old school approach, which is what I was hired to do, was to find young, undeveloped acts, bring them in, sign them before they were worth 400 or 500 grand on the market, even though usually their music wasn't, and develop them, old school artists and repertoire. And that's what I've been doing for EMI Publishing with 3 or 4 acts that I was working with. But it wasn't his style of doing things, and I was taller than him, so I had to go.
And ultimately that's what did it. About height. Yeah, right. You mentioned earlier, managing people like Julian Cope and Shriekback. I mentioned talking to Andy Partridge from XTC. I'm a huge fan of XTC, and I know Barry Andrews was part of Shriekback. So, if you have all the XTC records, you must then also have a bunch of Shriekback as well, even though they're two totally different bands. But it was a hell of a band all by itself between with Dave and Barry. Tell me about working with those guys.
Well, what had happened was when I'd stopped playing after I left Gang 4, I played for about a year and a half with another band and trying to do sessions, but I really wasn't that sort of drummer. And my brother was working with a manager who managed Blancmange and Shriekback and others. And my brother tour managed Shriekback quite often, and they were going to Europe. And Jolien was out. My brother Jolien was out. I think he was in the States with Julian Cope, because he was the principal for Julian Cope. And he said, "Oh, can you tour manage them?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." I think I'd already done some tour management. I'd been working with Working Week, who were a sort of hipster jazz band on Virgin Records at the time. That was good. So I took Shriekback to Europe, and it was unbelievably good fun. We all got on. It was back with Dave on the road, and and then I'd just also been playing with ABC. I'd done all the videos and stuff and TV appearances for That Was Then, But This Is Now, their second album. And in the same week, ABC said, well, we're leaving our manager. We're getting a manager in the US because that's where our future really is. Will you look after our management, our business in the UK, in Europe? Because we think you're really smart. You're a really good drummer, but we actually think you're as good, if not better, at this sort of stuff. It's a backhanded compliment. But literally on the ferry coming back from Europe with Shriekback, they said, listen, we're getting rid of our manager, and we want you to manage us because we want to get going in America more. And, so, and I balanced the two, and I thought ABC will probably be more reliable and solid financially, and I think, but Shriekback would be a lot more fun. So I went with Shriekback, and I managed them for 3 years, got them their deal with Island Records, based out of New York, because Chris Blackwell loved them. Went on. I tour managed them as well, which was like being on the road with the Visigoths. Basically, it was, but it was, it was good. Quite a few of the old Gang of Four crew were with us, and it was when I was managing them, and I was in partnership with my brother Jolly. We were Huge and Jolly Management, Hugo and Jolly, and those were our nicknames when we were kids. And Jolyon had taken over Neil Arthur from Blancmange,
Mm-hmm.
and I just moved. That's why I moved to New York. I wanted to be there when I was managing. So I'm rambling. What was the original question?
Well, I was asking about Shriekback as a band,
Yeah,
because to me it was
fantastic live band. I mean, just
great live band.
unbelievable good. Yeah, stunning. I loved being on the road with them. We went to Australia twice. First time with In Excess, who were friends. That was great. We did quite a lot of touring in the States with Simple Minds,
Mm-hmm.
who were fantastic to us as well. So yeah, we had a lot of fun.
So when is the reissue of Songs of the Free expected? Is that something that happens this year, or is it next year?
No. It's next year is the 40th anniversary. We are working hard to make sure that it can come out on the early side of next year to make it easier should there be a Gang of Four to go on tour. You said acutely. So yeah, we're working on that now. It won't be as obviously as grand a thing as the 77 to 81 box set, but it'll be an album plus. There was a reissue of Miles Davis Blue, which John bought me for my birthday, actually. Gorgeous, but it had a shrink wrap sort of book with it. But that's the sort of thing we're trying to aim to do. But the world over, vinyl, except just raw vinyl, has become a rare thing. So it's not easy, but we're doing our best.
And a lot of the plants that would normally have done vinyl are out of business, and so there's long delays and a lot of stuff being released. So hopefully, when you're working on this, those delays won't exist anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Hugo, it's I'm thrilled to talk to you. I like I said, I love those first two records, Entertainment and Solid Gold. And best of luck in the future. And again, I can't believe we're only 100 miles away from each other.
I know.
So I'll be over in about 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed talking with you.
Nice talking to you, Hugo. Thank you very much. Professor Hugo Burnham from Gang of Four. The name of the box set is Gang of Four, 77 through 81. It's an absolutely beautiful box set available on Matador Records, and it is just fantastic. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to share it, review it, spread the word to all your friends. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think, and thanks again for listening to Baxi's Musical Podcast.